Good evening. Welcome to this special program. Today's program is titled The Red Line. I'm your host. In this interview today, we will unpack the narratives swirling around the Horn of Africa, narratives often shaped by power, distorted by propaganda, and rarely told from Eritrean point of view. We are going to talk about this from Eritrean point of view, rather, with me tonight, Engineer Suleiman Hussin, a contributing member of Setit Media. We're going to discuss the Horn of Africa in depth, especially the narratives that coming from Addis Ababa, or we would like to call it Arat Kilo. Engineer Suleiman, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me.
You're not a guest here.
Normally, I think this is the first time we're having a show in English. If you don't mind me saying a couple of
Remarks.
words about that.
Sure.
Number one, I would like to congratulate you for initiating a program in English because this is very important. Among all the languages that are spoken across the Horn of Africa, English probably is the only language that's spoken in every single country across the Horn. So, in this sense, having a program in English would allow Setit to have a wider public, no, just one country or two countries, but every country in the Horn. And by the way, unless if I'm wrong, there is no, to my knowledge at least, an Eritrean channel that consistently broadcasts in English. And I hope Setit also would not be just a one-off, but a consistent program. And this would allow us, as citizens of the Horn, to engage in a constructive dialogue for our area, despite all the conflict. Our shared values, shared history, what makes the peoples of the Horn bring together is more than what divides them.
Sure.
And people tend to forget that. When we are talking about conflicts here and there, people tend to forget that rather than conflict, this is also a region that's has the potential to integrate and develop together because of the shared history, shared languages, you name it, topography and livelihood in every respect. The Horn of Africa has the potential to grow together, but only if we turn the page of the conflict and open a new phase of cooperation. So I hope this forum will promote dialogue, not further conflict. It doesn't mean that we should not criticize each other, because this is healthy, but criticism should be constructive and based on, not for the sake of criticizing, but when they are based on facts that promotes the truth and reconciliation in the Horn of Africa. So I don't want to take your time. My congratulations to the team of Setit Media for initiating this program. Thank you, Abdu.
Thank you very much, Engineer. You said it all. Probably this is the first channel broadcasting in English, I believe, especially among within Eritrean community. So the idea of this program is to make it clear what we stand for and make it clear the narratives that is going on, or in the narratives that is emanating from Addis Ababa are not healthy, and we wanted to tackle that. Tonight probably we the title for this program, as the viewers might already know, Seaport Fantasies and the Military Diplomacy, Ethiopia's Confused Agenda. So when we say that, I want to give viewers why we chose that title and what we are going to talk about. So I'm going to play you a clip from the Field Marshal something to say.
የኛ ሰው ኢሞሽናል ነው። የኛ ሰው ለመቀጠር በጣም ዝግጁ ነው። እንዴት እንደሆነ አይገባኝም። የሌላ ሀገር ሰው እኮ እንደዛ አይደለም። ግብጽ ሄደው እኮ ጸረ ግብጽ ናሽናል ኢንተረስት የምታሰልፈው ሰው ገንዘብ ሰጥተም እኮ አታገኝም። ሳዑዲ ሄዳ አታገኝም።
Perhaps it is a wrong clip, but what were spoken by Berhanu Jula during his address to Ethiopian Parliament or House of Representatives is that he suggested that some countries in the region are blocking Ethiopia from accessing the Red Sea. He didn't say which country or who and when and how, but his insinuation was that some countries in the region are blocking Ethiopia. Ethiopia, the country that has over 130 million population, is being blocked by some neighboring countries. So some took that and analyzed it like, okay, he's talking about Eritrea and then the countries like in the region, the big countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. He didn't say that, but people try to translate into that. So the first question, I think tonight we tackle two dangerous trends emerging from Addis Ababa. One is the increasing aggressive rhetoric over the Red Sea ports. And the second one is the disturbing rise of military figures speaking on foreign policy instead of civilian leaders, which is reserved for civilian leaders. But now we see military officers or generals talking about foreign policy, pushing Ethiopia towards the path of confusion and confrontation. As we saw probably in this clip, Berhanu Jula said, our people are ready to be stooges. I think that's the rough translation. Even like they are trying to be stooges for Sha'biya, which is the PFDJ. They think the connotation with them when they say Sha'biya is like a bad word, but he said some of us are ready to be stooges for PFDJ. That's what he said. So this is being seen as a dangerous path toward confusion and confrontation. So let's begin with strange appearance of Field Marshal Berhanu Jula, Ethiopian military chief, speaking before House of Representatives. Not on security updates, but on diplomacy and sea process or access. Why is a military general discussing foreign policy in a civilian forum? What does that tell us about the state of Ethiopian governance today, Suleiman?
Thank you, Abdu. I have actually listened to the entire clip, not the one you just played, but I think there was a much longer clip in which he spoke probably in greater detail about his country's quest to access the Red Sea and its historical rights and many other things. Now, the question that comes to mind is why did the Ethiopian Parliament called the Chief of Staff to give a briefing not on security issues, not on war-related issues, but on issues of international and regional diplomacy. Because these issues are traditionally the job of civilian diplomats and not military generals. So
Sure.
now, but leaving the question of why aside, if we just go back a little bit and follow events in the last few years in Ethiopia, there is one trend that comes out. Okay, the continuous aggressive rhetoric for acquiring a seaport for a landlocked country, and even aside the fact that this is in flagrant violation of international law, and leaving aside that it is a violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity of neighboring countries. Now, the people who come forward on TV to speak about this, you don't know who is who. A diplomat speaks about military, and a military officer speaks about diplomacy, and 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 they contradict each other. Few days ago, on the same Ethiopian parliament, in front of the same Ethiopian parliament, I remember Mr. Timotheus, Dr. Timotheus, also appeared before the parliamentary session, during which he was asked by a member of the parliament about the state of affairs relationship between Eritrea and Ethiopia and where things are going, and when would the war of words between the two countries would stop, or if the country is heading towards yet another conflict. And the foreign minister was adamantly clear in denying that there are no war of words between the two countries, and that every rhetoric that was broadcast by Ethiopian and other media was merely a personal opinion of either individual Ethiopians or former government officials. Now, if that was true, that we would say okay. But is it true? Is a defense minister, a current defense minister, does not represent the government? What about the prime minister, who is consistently pushing this agenda of acquiring the seaport? What about the field marshal himself? So who is lying? Is it the field marshal who is lying or misleading the parliament, or the foreign minister? And what's the reality on the ground? The reality on the ground is, since the Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed came up with this idea, renewed idea of his country having to need to acquire a seaport, which he claims that his country lost over the last 30 years because of some mistakes committed by Ethiopians and also by some international conspiracies, and that the country must repossess the seaport at any cost, by any means possible. Preferably, I'm quoting the Prime Minister, by peaceful and legal means. We don't know what that means, but these are his words. But otherwise, that otherwise is more important, by any means necessary. So, threatening the use of force, of course. So now, if the Prime Minister is merely expressing his personal views, who is speaking on behalf of the government? If the defense minister is speaking for himself, who is speaking on behalf of the government of Ethiopia? If the special advisor to the Prime Minister on issues related to the Horn of Africa is expressing his own personal views, then who is speaking on behalf of the government? So there is a total disarray and confusion. That shows the state in which Ethiopia finds itself at the moment, I think.
Okay, the rhetoric about sea access actually started back in 2023 October, when the Prime Minister gave a lengthy speech to I think members of the parliament, and since then the government of Ethiopia, especially the Prime Minister and around his circle, they have been pushing this idea. They tried to forge some sort of agreement with the breakaway region of Somaliland, and then they keep talking about the sea access and how the growth of the population and how that hindered the lack of sea access, how it has hindered the country from progressing. And whenever he speaks, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, he talks about national threat or existential need for the country. Now, to Ethiopia's language of existential need, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says lack of seaport access is a national threat, So how can anyone claim the land and coast of a sovereign neighbor, Eritrea, as essential to their survival?
That's $1 million question, Abdu, because either the Prime Minister ignores some historical facts or is deliberately misleading his own people and making them live in a fantasy, and in order to promote war and conflict in the area. The truth is, or the fact of the matter is, Ethiopia, like every other country in Africa, as we know it today, okay, came into being towards the end of 19th century during the scramble for Africa. Now, some people will argue Ethiopia was not colonized, blah, blah. We will leave that aside, although Ethiopia was indeed occupied by fascist Italy for 5 years. But just because the League of Nations did not give recognition to Italy as occupying state, then it's considered a country that was not colonized. Okay, we leave that aside. But let us assume it was not colonized. But all its current borders were defined by colonial treaties. The borders with Eritrea was defined by a treaty between Emperor Menelik and the Italian government, and the borders of Ethiopia with Egypt were also defined by a treaty between the same emperor, and the French government was occupying or colonizing Djibouti, and the same to every other border, whether it was Sudan with the British and Kenya with the British, and every other part of Ethiopia, the borders were defined during the colonial era. So the Ethiopia, as we know it today, is a product of European colonization, because we cannot speak about a country without having well-defined borders. And in fact, the Ethiopia that we know today came into being a few years after Eritrea came into being as a recognized
Country
of Italy. So that Ethiopia never had access to sea. Now, so the question that comes is, and begs an answer, is when did Ethiopia have access to sea and lost it then? And lost it by whom? And how does it, where do we put the colonial treaty defining the borders between Eritrea and between the borders between Eritrea and Ethiopia, which are colonial boundaries? Where do we put them? So now, if Ethiopia never had a seaport, then it cannot have a seaport legally. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that landlocked countries are bound to be isolated from the world, but there is an international law that allows them to engage in a dialogue of mutually beneficial dialogue with the coastal states and have access to sea. That's there. And Ethiopia actually enjoys this right. And over 90% of Ethiopian import and export transits through the port of Djibouti, to some extent also to the port of Lamu, and some extent through the port of Port Sudan before the civil war broke out, and during the 90s through the ports of Assab and Massawa. So Ethiopia was never denied access to sea. And what Ethiopia is looking for or asking for at the moment is not access to sea, because it has one. What it is actually demanding is ownership of a seaport. And that only means, although the Prime Minister tries to sugarcoat it by saying we would not go to war for that, we will seek to repossess the ports by peaceful and legal means. But if we give this rhetoric, try to give it a meaning, what does it mean? What are those legal means and peaceful means? Does it mean negotiating with a sovereign country and convince that sovereign country to cede part of its sovereign territory? And what if that country does not accept that? That's one. So the peaceful is just there to sugarcoat the warmongering. And let's talk about the legal way. What does legally means? It means if a country has illegally occupied another country's territory, whether it is coastal territory or any territory in the 21st century, this is not allowed. Ethiopia, without all this rhetoric and warmongering propaganda, can simply go to the to an international court and put a claim. And if Ethiopia believes that it has legal right to acquire the seaport of Eritrea, why is the need for all this rhetoric? Why doesn't it simply go to the International Court of Justice and put
a request?
So, or they know they have no legal right. So all this boils down to one thing. It's an expansionist agenda, and the only way Ethiopia can gain access to sea is by actually invading a neighboring country. And that's a very dangerous precedent. It does not only affect Eritrea and Ethiopia, or Ethiopia and Somalia, or Ethiopia, and it is against the international law, and it's a very dangerous precedent. So it is a threat to the international peace and stability, and that should be stopped by the international community.
Absolutely. As you tried to explain earlier, what makes the situation even more unstable is the contradiction between the Ethiopian government officials. The foreign minister tells the parliament there is no war of words with Eritrea, but the defense minister accuses Eritrea on TV. I'm talking about Dr. Aisha. At some point, she had some claims. Then claims the Eritrean Afars are Ethiopians, or they in that kind of circle. So, engineer, what is this? Is it miscommunication? Can it characterize it as a miscommunication, or is a coordinated smokescreen from Ethiopian government?
Unfortunately, the truth that is increasingly coming out of Ethiopia, not only a state of confusion, but lack of leadership, because contradictory statements between Prime Minister and his foreign minister, and the defense minister, and the chief of staff and the advisors. Everyone says one thing and the other one says something else. So this state of confusion brings into question I don't know how to call it, but lack of leadership in every sense of term. This does not manifest itself only because of the war rhetoric against Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia, but also within Ethiopia itself. Which part of Ethiopia is not at war with the central government today? Practically none. Okay, in every part of Ethiopia, civil war is going on. In the two largest regions of Ethiopia are the Oromia region and the Amhara region, and both of them have been battleground for years. Some people say around 80% of the Amhara region is not controlled by the government, and probably more or less a significant part of the Oromia region is not controlled by the central government. We know what's going on in Tigray. Tigray is practically a de facto state today. The only thing that links it with the rest of Ethiopia is the fragile Pretoria Agreement, an agreement which both sides say is not been implemented. They have just not officially said that it has failed, but both sides keep telling the world that the Pretoria Agreement has not been implemented. So, which part of Ethiopia is at peace with the central government, and where is Ethiopia heading? That's the most dangerous question that concerns not just Ethiopians, but the rest of the peoples of the Horn of Africa, because Ethiopia being a very large country, a huge country with a population of 120 million. So the breaking down of law and order in Ethiopia would have a consequence not just for Ethiopia, but for the rest of the region and beyond the region. It also threatens peace and stability in the rest of Africa and the world. So this Ethiopia is heading on this dangerous journey, and the world is just been silent, and that's how things are. So what's happening with Eritrea and Somalia and Djibouti cannot be separated from what's happening among Ethiopians themselves. The state of confusion that is in Ethiopia today is the worst in its modern history.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned the Pretoria Agreement. Some say that today's disagreement or whatever's going on between the government of Eritrea and Ethiopia, they try to attribute that to Pretoria Agreement. They say Eritrean government or President Isaias Afwerki started to distance himself when Ethiopian government signed the Pretoria Agreement in Pretoria, South Africa. But as previously we had an different program. In fact, I think last Wednesday we spoke about this. In the future, probably we're going to try to unpack the real reason what's going on today. I just want to mention one thing. If you, as I can recall, few months ago we had a joint program with author and journalist and researcher Elias Amare. He mentioned that in the program, one of the conversations that he and others had back, I think in 2001, with late Ethiopian author Sisay Ipsa. So he mentioned something about the empire is going to bite you back, or I think a similar statement that he made. Do you think that's what we're seeing today? The empire is trying to reclaim something that they never owned, or trying to revive the expansionist idea of maybe like 19th, 18th century ambitions?
Although I don't recall the late
Society.
Ipsa said how should people deal with Ethiopia then, but on one aspect he's quite right, because an empire that was built by war of expansion has this mindset. Its leadership cannot free itself from the mindset of expansion through which it has come into being as an empire. So that in the 19th century, when Menelik, the king of Showa, then expanded his empire towards the north and south, this was done by subjugating people who had their own history, their own type of administration, and some even had kingdoms. So these were practically occupied by force in some areas with a lot of violence against populations. So the problem is not how it came to be only. The problem is that mindset is still live and in the minds of Ethiopian rulers. And we as Eritreans have been on the receiving end of this expansionist mindset. And not only Eritreans, also the Somalis, also the Djiboutians. Even Djibouti, the tiny country that borders with Ethiopia and Eritrea, would not have stayed as an independent country if it was not defended by the French army. The same wrong narratives that try to tell that Eritrea was part of Ethiopia would also tell you that Djibouti was part of Ethiopia, and that it was leased by a treaty to the French in the 19th century for 99 years. But if you search for that treaty, it's non-existent. But Ethiopians do believe that it was the emperor who ceded Djibouti for 99 years under terms of lease that should end after 99 years. But that treaty is non-existent. Djibouti was colonized by France, like any other country was colonized, without the need to have a treaty with an emperor who was not in power yet. By the way, Ethiopia itself, of Emperor Haile Selassie, did not define its borders yet at the time when the Italians took Italy and when the French took Djibouti. So there was no need for the French to enter into agreement with Ethiopia or with anyone else. It was simply a colonial state colonized by the French. So this is a false narrative. But as the famous German propaganda just Goebbels tell us, when lies are repeated consistently, and they tend to become true. This is what I think this false narrative is also believed by a significant part of the Ethiopian elite, and this is what we see. Otherwise, I searched myself and I spoke to many people who are very knowledgeable. There is nothing called about a treaty that allowed France to take the territory called the Afar and Isa at the time, which later became Djibouti. And in the same narrative would also tell you that Assab was under the rule of Menelik when the Italians made an agreement with a sultan, local sultan there, and took control of Assab. It's also another fallacy, because Menelik himself was not even in power, let alone to allow or not allow Assab to be taken by Italy. So all these false narratives should come to an end. And part of the problem, in fact, the biggest problem in the Horn of Africa is the distorted history and the narratives that are based on distortion, and this is what is making us pay a huge price.
Okay, so let's go back to some of the claims by Ethiopian leadership, the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, also the Field Marshal. So they have repeatedly, on several occasions, they talk about ethnicities or along that line. So Africa, like in Africa, there are ethnicities across the border in different countries. For example, we can take Ethiopia. There are Somalis in Ethiopia, and there are Somalis in Somalia, and there are Somalis in Kenya. Now, there are Afars in Ethiopia, and there are Afars in Eritrea and Djibouti. Now, are they trying to weaponize the ethnic politics that they have in Ethiopia? Are they trying to weaponize and export it to Eritrea? Do you see that?
I don't know how to put it. I just find it very strange, because by the same argument, although this does not hold water, but if we accept the notion that because there are Afars in Ethiopia and because there are Afars in Djibouti and in Eritrea, that Afar territory should be one, and then Ethiopia should have access to the sea. This is either ignorance of the way states were formed in Africa, ignorance of the colonial treaties, ignorance of sovereignty, and ignorance of international law. What if the Benishangul tribe that lives across both sides of the border in Sudan and Ethiopia, because the majority of the Benishangul live in Sudan, what if the Sudanese use the same argument to claim the territory on which the Grand Renaissance Dam is built? Because there are some people who speak about that. What about the over 88 million Somalis who live in Ethiopia don't have the right to live in the same country called Somalia like the rest of the Somalis, like the majority of Somalis. So all this will only bring chaos in Africa, which is the reason why African states, when they formed the African Union, they all agreed that on the sanctity of colonial borders, because everything else is a recipe for chaos across the continent. That's why now the colonial treaties are part of the international law, and any infringement of colonial boundaries is a violation of the international law. Period. Any other argument does not hold water. So if the Prime Minister wants to promote of Ethiopia, promote such an agenda, I think he's bringing into question his own. How do I don't want to add more, but you see what I mean, how things are going. So if a Prime Minister is not aware of international law and international boundaries, then the question that begs an answer: how can continue to become Prime Minister? And if he does, where does the country head? And we can see where Ethiopia is heading, unfortunately. So I think the whole issue, what I called earlier, lack of leadership, comes to the forefront.
Let's talk about 2018 peace deal, the peace deal between Eritrea and Ethiopia that took place in Asmara. Sometimes we call it Asmara Declaration. So most of Eritreans, even the government, I believe that the Asmara Declaration was a new chapter between Eritrea and Ethiopia, for that matter, for the people of both nations. But now, from what is happening in Ethiopian side, it looks like it was tactical, just a wartime alliance that Ethiopia forged with Eritrea because it's perceived that TPLF is enemy, the Eritrean government's enemy, so they try to forge an alliance to crush TPLF. I think they tried to do that in a war that was taking place between 2020 and 2022. So recently we see different alliances being forged in the region. Eritrean, not officially, but in the Eritrean side, we see alliances being forged with the TPLF faction that is in Tigray at this moment. And then Ethiopia is trying to gather some remnants of the Eritrean opposition or so-called opposition and try to put them to work for Ethiopia, not for Eritrea. So those recent statements and developments confirm the peace was never real in 2018.
I think not just Eritrea, but across the Horn and across the continent, and even at the international level, people did believe that the Horn of Africa may be opening. There's a new hope that countries of the Horn might turn the page of non-ending conflict and enter into a new phase of mutual respect and development. So that hope was dashed soon. Now, there is assumption that the Ethiopian government's decision to make a peace deal with Eritrea was not grounded on a genuine belief in peace, but it was a tactical maneuver. Now the Field Marshal who spoke recently, I think it was last week, appeared in front of the parliamentary session, is saying exactly that. I think he was not sure in his words. I think his appearance was, in a way, a blessing of disguise, because he highlighted many points that were a question of speculation and analysis. And when you hear it from the horse's mouth, it's different than when people analyze following the events that followed the peace agreement. Now, The Field Marshal told lawmakers last week that Ethiopia made the peace deal with Eritrea, hoping that it may regain access to Assab, or at least partially own Assab. This was their calculation, because this is what the Marshal said. Of course, now this statement by the Field Marshal, unless it was other government officials clarify that position, if we take that seriously, it means Ethiopia made a tactical maneuver, primarily for accessing, primarily to confront the huge and at the time very powerful TPLF that was threatening the central government, and also after dealing with that imminent threat to gain access to the sea. Now, we are not saying that, and the Field Marshal said that. Okay, and people who doubt the sincerity of the Ethiopian government, they are proven true by the Field Marshal, unless it is denied by the Prime Minister or any spokesperson of the government. We are bound to take what the Field Marshal said as an official statement of the government, and this is very dangerous, actually. Now, were there other people wrong in hoping that there is a new era in the Horn of Africa? Absolutely no, because we need that new era for future generations, because countries of the Horn of Africa and its people cannot keep always in continuous conflict. There must be a time when this mostly conflict is mostly driven by foreign agendas should come to an end. And if there are any issues which are domestic, can be resolved by peacefully and legally. But at the end of the day, the Horn of Africa, its future lies in integration, not in continued conflict. So people who believe in this were not wrong in giving the benefit of doubt to a new government that came following a huge popular uprising in Ethiopia. The problem lies with those who make this new hope dashed, not with those who hoped for a new era.
Okay, you said something very interesting. The future of the Horn of Africa lies in the hope of integration, which has been the official position of the Eritrean government. They say, the president repeatedly said that we have to have a culture of cooperation in the region in different occasions. So that I think the hope, the lights of hope that we had seen in 2018 has disappeared in the horizon. I think most people also would blame Ethiopian government for that. To conclude today's episode or program,
We'll come to the conclusion. Okay, a few words before we come to the conclusion. We keep saying that the Horn of Africa is home to continued conflict, but if we go beyond the headline, who is in conflict with who? Okay, the lion's share of the problems that bring conflicts in the Horn of Africa lie with the Ethiopian rulers. There is no Somalia invading Kenya. And I don't mean there are some small disagreements here and there, like it happens everywhere in the world. But although there are tiny problems here and there between Sudan and South Sudan, Kenya and Somalia, but the main, the lion's share of all the root causes for the perpetual instability and conflict in the Horn of Africa emanates or originates from Ethiopia. So we have to call a spade, and unless things change in Ethiopia, the peoples of the Horn of Africa It's very difficult to see otherwise. One way or another, Ethiopia has to change. Either the mindset of Ethiopian rulers has to change, or Ethiopians should rearrange and restructure their own country in a way that makes it an integral part of the Horn of Africa and a positive contributor to the stability and peace in the Horn of Africa. So I would leave it there, but people just generally say that Horn of Africa. No, it's not the Horn of Africa. It is the Horn of Africa suffering because of the expansionist mindset in Ethiopia, that's another important point, a client state to the colonial world. We were saying about whether Ethiopia was colonized or not. Now, the colonial powers who exercise their the domination and influence in the world in the name of neo-colonialism, they need client states who execute their agenda, and Ethiopia has been one for the last 80 years. So just to show some irony about a country that was never colonized, continuously serving the agenda of the colonial powers.
Indeed, and I was thinking when you said the future of Horn of Africa lies in hope of integration. From the look of it, Ethiopia is hoping for disintegration from what they have been doing in the past few years. Also, a lot of times we say, or we hear people saying, or media saying, that the Horn of Africa is a volatile region with a lot of conflicts. Like you mentioned, well, there is no interstate conflict, except Ethiopia is hoping for one, trying to push either Eritrea or Somalia into war with them. But there is huge interstate conflict in Ethiopia for the past, 40 years, let's say, or 30 years, since actually 1991. There has been conflict in Ethiopia, especially in the past 7 years since Prime Minister Abiy came to power. There is always conflict within Ethiopia. There is no conflict within Eritrea. There is no conflict within Djibouti. Somalia, as we know, Somalia is Somalia. And Kenya, there is no conflict within its borders. There's just conflict.
90% of intrastate conflict is in Ethiopia.
True.
Maybe less than 20% is in Sudan and South Sudan. But much of, the figure I'm giving is just, it's not based on statistics, but it's just a rough way of putting things. But there are, of course, interests in interstate conflict in South Sudan and Sudan, but the bulk of the conflict is in Ethiopia, and it has been going on for the last 8 years. It is true, it has become worse in the last 7 years since Dr. Abiy Ahmed came to power, but it has been part of Ethiopian history for the last 80 years.
Okay. We're talking about dangerous rhetoric that's emanating from Ethiopia, that's threatening the sovereignty of neighboring countries like Somalia, Eritrea, and so on. If we talk about the issues or the problems, we have to also talk about what is the forward solution to this kind of dangerous rhetoric. So what should Eritrea's response be in this kind of situation, given the threats, coordinations, and provocations that we have seen coming from Addis Ababa? What is the a strategic way forward for Eritrea as a tiny, even 35 years for a country is very a small number. So as a tiny and small country, what is a strategic way forward?
Yeah, at the beginning of the program, I tried to link the problems coming from Ethiopia, both internally in terms of ongoing conflict in Ethiopia, and also the promoting conflict between Ethiopia and its neighbors. And the origin is one, and it's the leadership in Addis Ababa, or Arat Kilo, as the Ethiopians like to say it. Now, this means that not only other countries of the Horn of Africa are at the receiving end of this rhetoric, but also the peoples of Ethiopia themselves are rising up against this trend because they are also at the receiving end. So the idea of solidarity among the peoples and countries of the Horn of Africa is the right answer. And if Ethiopian government is not willing to listen to these people, let alone its neighbors, countries of the Horn of Africa should find a way to work with peoples in Ethiopia who are trying to change the course of history in their own country, and which will have a positive impact on the Horn of Africa. So it would have been good if governments work together, but if governments are not working together, and if a government like the government in Ethiopia is not only trying to create conflict with other states, but also creating, inventing actually sometimes, because the conflict in Amhara, I think there is no logic behind it, or the conflict in Somalia, which was until 2-3 years ago considered, the Somali region of Ethiopia, which about 2-3 years ago was considered the most peaceful region in Ethiopia, is now on the verge of going to full-fledged war. So now, if the Ethiopians themselves are not happy with their government and trying to change the course of history, and solidarity should be extended to the peoples of Ethiopia, because if Ethiopia changes, it will have a positive impact on the rest of the Horn.
Okay, I think Engineer Suleiman, for today we have to stop right here, because there are a lot of topics I would like to discuss with you and with other individuals regarding the dangerous rhetoric or narratives emanating from Ethiopia regarding the nature and feature and history of the Horn of Africa, which is not healthy, to say at least, the least. So for today, we're gonna stop right here, and hopefully, this is not the last program. This is the first program. We will try to have this kind of episodes, maybe two times a month, which is every 2 weeks. Depending on the situation and the severity of the issues that rise in the Horn of Africa. So, on behalf of my colleagues and viewers, I would like to appreciate you for coming to this program, Engineer. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.